Hi everybody, welcome back to Brandeis Buzz, the Brandeis Admissions podcast. I am here with Riley Miner, one of our amazing student leaders and a member of the class of 2025. Riley, could you just introduce yourself to start off?
Yeah, my name's Riley Genevieve Miner. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from El Paso, Texas, born and raised. And basically a quick summary about me is I'm a very passionate Reformed Jew. I really care about social justice. Things I've done on campus, I've been really involved in Hillel. I was the 2023 Hillel Vice President, 2024 Hillel President, and now I'm involved in Student Union once my term ended.
Amazing. So can we talk a little bit more about Hillel, because that seems like it was a really big part of your life at Brandeis. So how did you get involved with Hillel in the first place?
Yeah, so before coming to Brandeis, I did Genesis, which is one of Brandeis' Precollege programs, focusing on Jewish leadership and academics. I really loved it. I felt like during the pandemic when I applied to college, it gave a really smooth transition of I knew Brandeis had strong Jewish life. When I got to campus, I was walking around the perimeter of Jewish life, I guess is the best way to say it. I knew that I really loved my Jewish identity and I was really passionate about exploring it, but I didn't know how to fall in. Hillel here at Brandeis is comprised of over 20 student groups and initiatives, so there were a lot of things that I was kind of involved in. And over time, I realized that I had a big passion for giving back to the community. I would go to programs, and I wanted to be the ones leading the programs and choosing what our education sessions were going to be on. So I decided to kind of just dive in. I ran for the 2023 Vice President. I served on a really passionate board. We did a lot of community building programs and kind of restructuring what Hillel programming was to be these big, large community programs that brought everyone into the tent, regardless of denomination or things like that. And when I ran for the 2024 Hillel President, I really wanted to make that tent bigger and find ways that people could kind of create their own communities within it.
Awesome. And for those who don't know, especially for prospective students, what do you think makes Brandeis Hillel really stand out and really special? For context, for those who don't know, Hillel is an on-campus organization for Jewish students. I'm a member of Brandeis Hillel, but I've never been on Hillel board, so I want to hear from someone who's had that leadership experience, what makes Brandeis Hillel really stand out?
Yeah, I think, so I have a brother who goes to another school. When I went to their Hillel programs, it's I don't think unique for a Hillel to have student groups under it. But what makes Brandeis Hillel special, specifically on our campus, is how we operate everywhere, which I think is a real beauty, but also the many, many groups that we have. We have a Sephardic student group. We also have the Hillel Organization of Gamers, where Jewish students come together to play games, video games, board games, you name it. We also have denomination-based groups where students will come together to celebrate their Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox identity, and they'll do learning based on whatever theology that denomination is about. I think Hillel here is very unique in that it's so large. It's very rare to find another Hillel that will have over 20 student groups and initiatives, plus staff-led things.
So definitely running something like that, something so widespread, must be really complicated. So what initiatives did you take to really forge a feeling of community at Hillel, so it doesn't feel like these different groups, but instead it's just one big sort of family?
Yeah. So the role of the student board when I first ran was they ran Shabbat dinner, and then they kind of served as these liaisons between student leaders and staff. And when we were doing bylaw review, we really had to think about the role of the student board and what we wanted the student board to be doing. I don't want to say felt like a waste of time, but it was really tiring to have to kind of serve in that up and back role between student leaders and staff. And we realized there was a lot of potential to run large programming that brought everyone together, meaning that we could partner with our denominational groups to maybe extend the marketing of the program and extend how many leaders were actually involved in running the show. But what we found was that bringing everyone together under a big space where people aren't worried about what backgrounds they're coming in with, but instead they were coming together to learn or to just enjoy some ice cream on a hot summer day. It was really good to kind of bring the whole community together beyond just weekly Shabbat dinners.
Awesome. And what was your favorite event that you ran, either as VP or as president?
Yeah, so the event that I have like called my baby through Hillel is actually Harvest Festival, which is
I love Harvest Festival.
Yes.
I talk about it on my campus tours as a Hillel thing.
It's great. So Hillel used to have a Hillel Involvement Fair. It was in the SCC, which is the Shapiro Campus Center, and we would have about 20 student clubs have their own tables, and they would talk about what their group did. The thing was, it wasn't very enticing to get people to tell people to come to the Hillel Involvement Fair after the big club involvement fair that brings in over 200 clubs. We just weren't getting enough students in. So as we were planning for our fall semester, I threw out the idea of what if we made it a carnival? And we shifted the Hillel Involvement Fair to be this large harvest festival where each student group ran a booth related to what they did. While it may be a little confusing, there were things like the Organization of Gamers that I mentioned earlier. They ran like games, which made sense, but our Reform group ran a like Reform Q&A fill-in-the-blank activity, which like got people to come to the table and learn about what Reform Judaism was. So that's a really good example there. It's a great event. We've had apple cider donuts and apple cider when the event was the time where it was colder. This past semester, though, we blew up a Gaga pit in the middle of Fellows Garden, and then had ice cream and just brought everyone together, and it brings over 200 students together each semester.
Awesome. And what lessons do you think you took away from just this leadership experience? Because you came in passionate about Judaism, and obviously, like, Hillel still means so much to you, but, like, how do you think you yourself grew through these roles?
Yeah. So when I came to Brandeis, I had intended to major in anthropology. And I say that because that shifted to a minor, and I really found that I enjoyed medical anthropology. So my major is now HSSP, which is Health, Science, Society, and Policy, and I'm minoring in NEJUS, which is Near Eastern and Judaic Studies. We love our acronyms. But I think with that, when I was doing Hillel leadership, I really found that I enjoyed experiential Jewish education. And I was kind of looking at it and trying to see if, like, the Jewish professionals who were mentoring me, they did this as their full-time jobs. And I kind of questioned if that could be a career path I went down. So now at this point, I've taken 9 classes related to Jewish education or religious education broadly, and I've really found that what I want to go into is like event and program management, which is exactly what I did on Hillel board, but as a professional career, either at a congregation or for a large organization.
Amazing. And kind of broadening, so you talked a little bit about your academic life, like, how did you balance all of this? Because you're doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So Brandeis students, I think, are, I don't want to say like overcommitted, because I think everyone's committed to what they do, but we're very passionate about what we do. Yeah. So while I've been doing Hillel and managing my course load, I think it was smart that I did a single major, considering how involved I wanted to be in my extracurriculars. I was also dealing with jobs. I've had 2 student jobs while I've been at Brandeis, and it's all been really impactful, and I think the biggest thing came down to, like, everyone at Brandeis is flexible, and everyone's kind of in the same boat of sometimes you'll be with someone in class and you both are running to the exact same meeting across campus for whatever club or organization you're involved in. It just came down to a lot of like managing workload, talking to professors. Professors here are so not, I don't want to say like flexible. They're not just going to move their deadlines for like you to run an event, but if you explain like your situation, professors want to like support you and help you reach your goals both in the classroom and within your extracurriculars.
Definitely, that's definitely been my experience too, because I too am we'll say very committed.
Yes.
student. And do you mind if I like ask you some deep questions about Judaism?
Go for it.
I figure if you're Hillel President, that's like
Yeah.
okay. So I guess to start off, like, how have you like grown into your Jewish identity while at Brandeis?
Yeah, I think at first when I came to Brandeis, the COVID pandemic, I think, shook everyone's Jewish identity and meaning of what it meant to be in community. And I think Jewish community was a little harder because there was this barrier of how do you connect with faith over Zoom. So when I came to campus, I think I was very fixated on this idea of faith and spirituality and what that meant. And I quickly found that services weren't always the best way for me to connect with my Jewish identity, and instead it really came through culture. I've really enjoyed the times while at Brandeis where I've celebrated Jewish holidays in a very cultural way. This past summer, some friends and I were here working at Brandeis, various jobs across campus, and we decided to have like a Shavuot dinner where we kind of like celebrated a Jewish holiday, but in a very like, I don't want to say like cliche way, but we like enjoyed cheesecake and laughed about like the many ways that we could celebrate a Jewish holiday related to the Torah in the like cultural traditional way of like eating dairy products. So I think at Brandeis what I've really found is like culture is a big way I connect to my Jewish identity, and there's a lot of infrastructure to help students create those cultural spaces that you don't necessarily need a rabbi to lead or create for you.
Definitely. Actually, can I ask you some like this or that Jew questions?
Go for it.
Just for fun. Okay, I'm not judging you for your answers, but I'm judging you. Okay, so to start off, Hanukkah or Purim?
Ooh, definitely Purim.
Nice. And Shabbat dinner or Pesach Seder?
Pesach Seder? We don't have that at school though, because we're off, so I think there are benefits to both.
Bar mitzvah or Jewish wedding?
Ooh, Bar mitzvah. We also have a like big Bar mitzvah party.
Coming up, I'm really excited.
Yeah, every spring semester, Masorti, which is our conservative group on campus, hosts like a big Bar mitzvah. So I think that's also hyped up the idea.
Definitely. Meat or dairy?
Ooh, dairy. Yeah, I'm a big fan of cheese, even though, you know, the lactose intolerance gets to us all.
Okay, let's stick with the food questions for a bit. Challah or babka?
I think challah. Yeah, there's also something very special about like making challah as a community.
Definitely. Milk Street or Andrews?
These
These are catering companies, by the way, that we have at Shabbat dinner.
Yes, I think Milk Street brownies, the
Okay,
best.
real. But like Andrews mousse cups?
Yes, Andrew's chocolate
put that out
mousse.
there.
I think everyone
Okay,
looks
well.
forward to it. You know, the end of semester
I think
big
they're
treat.
having Andrews in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. Okay, hang on. Back on track. Would you rather be at a learning event or would you rather be at a social event?
Ooh, I'm gonna kind of bypass the question of I think you can make events both. I think formal learning environments, while it's great to sit down and have a Hevruta partner or like a partner you study with, which is what a Hevruta partner is, I think it's actually really meaningful to have an event where you're learning together with like in a social aspect. That looks like a lot of different things, but a great example is like we have a Tu B'Shvat Seder, which is where we're learning about Tu B'Shvat, but in a very, very social aspect.
All right. Lulav or etrog?
Ooh, etrog.
Smells nice.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna conclude. I think I'm gonna close with a Shabbat night or Shabbat morning.
Ooh, I'm definitely someone who sleeps in on the morning, so I think Shabbat night. It's
Yeah.
also really like sacred to walk around campus Shabbat evening and run into people and just start up those conversations where some people are just like totally disconnected from the world and taking in everything around them.
Definitely. All right. I'm gonna go back to something more serious
Yes.
now, which is for incoming students for first years who are interested in Jewish life but maybe don't really know where to begin. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah. So when I was a first year, like I said, I was a little nervous standing on the periphery of things. My biggest advice is go on the Hillel first year retreat. That was life-changing to my Jewish experience on campus. Some years the first year retreat is like taken off campus where all of the like Jewish first years will go off campus to a camp and kind of like take in Shabbat together. Or like it'll be ahead of school. Right now it's a pre-orientation program where everyone comes together to celebrate Shabbat, but it's a really good experiment of like what does it look like to have a bunch of first year Jewish students who like everyone's a little nervous, and I think everyone can admit that, spend time together and like dive headfirst in. I think oftentimes when people enter Jewish spaces, no matter their background, they're a little worried about being judged. I think Brandeis Hillel is like a very non-judgmental space, but my thing is like to dive right in. If you're not able to make it to the first year retreat, it happens, but like dive into those educational events and those social events and go to things that you typically wouldn't see yourself going to.
And how do you think like the first year experience at Hillel has impacted your like time as president? Because I know it's changed over the years. Like, how did you engage first years when you became that upperclassman role model?
Yeah, so I think first year engagement was one of the highlights of board. It's a little weird to like be a junior or senior on board and realize that at one point you were in the first year's shoes, and to really like put into it's a good like setting point. My biggest thing is like connect with Hillel students, Hillel student leaders. The Hillel Student Board reaches out and gets coffee, offers coffee invitations to any first years who follow up on it. Don't worry, not necessarily coffee, it can be tea, anything that you can get on campus. But I think it's really meaningful to like have those one-on-one connections with first years. It was also like a great point of mentorship. Getting to talk to a junior who was on the Hillel Student Board and see like the like inside scoop of Brandeis, and get to know like which departments are really helpful when you have certain problems arise. I was only able to ask those questions because I built relationships with upperclassmen within Hillel.
Definitely. I had a similar experience. Just older students are so ready to reach out
Yeah.
to younger students about Hillel things. And what's like a typical day in the life as a Hillel board member? This is very exciting for me because I have no idea what you all do.
Yeah, I think I'll go over like what my schedule looked like last year. I would wake up, I'd grab breakfast. I tend to get a lot of emails. I think like I would spend breakfast sifting through my emails, and I'd meet with our assistant director, Dr. Samantha Pickett, who oversees the Hillel Student Board. And we'd meet to talk about anything from engagement to specific programs we have coming up. And from that meeting, I'd often go into a meeting with one of my board members, just checking in, seeing what they're doing. If it was with our treasurer, it was usually going over the budget and things like that. Or I'd sit down and talk to our Tikkun Olam coordinator and talk about like an upcoming Jewish holiday or something where we could like implement a social justice aspect into an event. Then I typically grab lunch. I'm a big fan of Louis, our kosher deli on campus. It's located up the hill near where a lot of my classes have been. So we do that, grab lunch. Often then I had classes. A lot of my classes have been in the afternoons. But afterwards I'd like either have a Hillel Student Board meeting or be meeting with some student group leaders. Our Hillel Student Board meetings were really nice. We'd all come together, talk about like different projects we're working on, and then also talk about those bigger board projects. So being on board was really nice because you had your own little side projects, but you also had the big things that we'd plan, like our holidays or like engagement initiatives that we were working on. And after that, you'd probably find me at Sherman enjoying our dining hall in like our big community-wide it's a big community-wide space where like our kosher dining hall is like also with a non-kosher dining hall and everyone can sit together.
Definitely. And I guess this is kind of a heavy-hitting question, but like obviously in the modern Jewish community there are a lot of issues and controversies that we as Jews sort of confront and deal with every day. And how do you think Hillel leadership has either changed your perspective on this or just prepared you to have these conversations?
Yeah, I think Hillel staff have done a really good job teaching student board members how to respond to, I don't want to call them crises, but I think unfortunately like this time, like when something bad happens within the Jewish community, how to respond and how to take like a nuanced and intentional approach. Hillel staff have really provided a lot of mentorship of like the importance of words and language, but also like the importance of our role as students to bring everyone together, not necessarily make a public statement. I think Brandeis Hillel has done a really good job of like setting the tone of spaces when we all just need to come together. I think in a post-October 7th world, it can be a lot sometimes. And Hillel staff have been really supportive of student leaders and whether they want to do projects like bringing in speakers or just creating some community spaces for students to process things.
Yeah, I always say that Brandeis is one of these places where it's possible to have these conversations at such a high level because of the work that organizations like Hillel and the university as a whole just put into making sure people are educated, people understand how to like enter these conversations. And I think I've at least felt lucky to have Brandeis Hillel kind of supporting me through that.
Yeah. Recently I did a workshop with Resetting the Table through Hillel, and that was really meaningful. They brought a bunch of Hillel student leaders together to talk about how to have difficult conversations. Because we really want to prepare students on how to walk into the room and have those difficult conversations, not just like with the facts they should know going in, but instead what approaches you should take.
Yeah, exactly. And this is going to be like a question you might need to think about. Like, if you could only use one word to describe Brandeis Hillel, what would you choose? It has to be like one word, not one phrase.
One word. I think I'd go back to what Brandeis is all about, of passionate. You walk into Hillel and you'll see students doing their homework, but they're really passionate about their majors. Or you'll see students working to put together a program and you'll see that they're very passionate about bringing community together. Everyone here has a sense of passion, and that's really, really deeply rooted within Hillel as well.
Definitely. Okay, so we talked a lot about Hillel, but I know that there's a stereotype that Hillel leadership has no life outside of Hillel, and I call upon you to defy that stereotype, so I'm going to ask you some other questions just about yourself. So we talked about your first year experience, and I know you did Genesis in the years approaching college, I can talk, but I also wanted to ask just what's it like coming to the Northeast from Texas? What was that transition like? And also you came into Brandeis during the COVID years, so how did that also impact just your transition to college life?
I think a lot of students my year, when I was in high school, were looking to kind of like escape the Texas bubble, and I had a lot of friends who moved, actually applied to schools in New York, so I want to say like they're close, but they're a little far. And I think when I was looking at colleges, I really did want to be somewhere that was a bit away, and I fell in love with Brandeis. And that transition, I think, I was worried it was going to be a little rougher than it was. I found that Brandeis is really good. It's really nice to have like some of the fall holidays off. That helped with like getting to go home for Rosh Hashanah, as a silly example. But the transition, it was really about making sure to keep my networks tight, and I want to say just like communicate. I was really worried about being a few time zones off from home, because we're on Mountain Time and here we're on Eastern Time. And even just things like those daily check-ins with family came to mean a lot. But also, when I arrived on campus, one of the most important things that I knew was like I didn't want to let myself be lonely and be isolated in my room. So I would purposely go to random club meetings, I'd like to say, that were like close to my interest that I wasn't sure if I wanted to get involved in, just so I had something to do and someone to see and talk to. One of the great examples is our pottery club on campus has pottery hours, and those are almost daily, and a lot of the times they were in the evening, so I'd go from like a recitation section to pottery club. That way I could just be around people and get to grow my network.
Amazing, definitely. And I know you're an HSSP major, but what advice would you give to someone, more advice questions, but like who wants to do HSSP, because it's such a unique program that we have at Brandeis?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed HSSP and the like unique aspect to like health that it takes. I think a lot of schools you can go and you can get a like public health undergrad major. But HSSP is unique in that it's really bringing in the sociology and anthropology lens to public health. When I have to explain it during job interviews, that's kind of how I sum it up. It's nice, and it really complements a like pre-med program. I think we're seeing a lot of like within the healthcare field, a lot of professionals don't understand the like importance of diversity in the workplace, and that's something that HSSP really talks about, and the like social determinants of health, which I'm happy to explain more of. Like that's the many ways that like your environment around you impacts health, and that's something that like not all doctors know, but it's really important for doctors to know. I know a lot of like my fellow peers who are in my HSSP classes are actually on pre-med tracks, and it like gives a like nuanced and full picture view, where you're also able to then double major with biology. Had I wanted to, it wouldn't have been that complicated, but it gives you a like leg up in medical school applications.
Definitely. And How do you think your Brandeis experience has just sort of prepared you for your next steps?
Yeah, I think my Brandeis experience has prepared me in a lot of unique ways. One, I think it's very unique, the way the classes are structured here. It's really nice that they're smaller. I've talked to friends at other schools who have much larger classes, and I really appreciate that we have small classes where we get to form one-on-one relationships with our professors who are then mentors. So I think having that experience of mentorship is one thing that I really look for in careers and positions that I'm currently applying to. But I think the other is the hard skills and soft skills. So Brandeis, we have our core curriculum, and I really think things like taking oral communications classes have made me a more confident public speaker. I came in fairly confident, but now I really know how to take information, process it, and orally communicate it in a much more effective way. And I think on top of that, things like the writing requirements have made me a stronger writer. So those are kind of the hard skills, and that hard skills and soft skills, I guess, that I'm referring to. But even things that I picked up during my jobs. I'm a community advisor, and I've really learned how to use spreadsheets, which is something that's crazy helpful to talk about. And when I'm applying for jobs, it's really nice that I can say I know how to input formulas onto a spreadsheet, when someone who's coming from an education background may not have that same strength. I know Brandeis is shifting its core curriculum moving forward to kind of boost this and make it an even better program, also a little more formalized. But that's been one of the big strengths that I appreciate walking out of Brandeis with, is I know that my skills section on my resume is very boosted, and I feel very confident doing a lot of different things.
Nice. All right. Kind of last question on your Brandeis experience.
Yeah.
So what's been the most challenging thing during your 4 years at Brandeis? Challenge you've overcome, challenge you might still be dealing with, and then on the flip side, what's the most rewarding thing that you're taking out of your 4 years here?
Ooh, 2 good questions. I think the most challenging thing I've dealt with while here has actually been stuff going on at home and how to react while here. Sometimes being far away from home is not ideal. My mom was dealing with some health stuff, and it felt like being in Boston, I was doing nothing. To be from Texas and be going to school here, I think sometimes I would get a little nervous that I wasn't doing enough, and I would put that stress on myself. The weird thing I noticed was that when I communicated that with my professors or Hillel's staff, they were ready to support me. I had a professor whose office hours I just had sat in, and she talked with me not even about assignments, but just about everything I was going through and dealing with, and how to balance my schedule, and how maybe I could arrange my papers and their due dates, that way I could go home and see my family. So that was a really challenging thing I got through, and I think one of the most rewarding moments I've had here is seeing the students who I've mentored over the years get to where they are. It's very funny. The current Hillel President, who's my successor, was actually my first resident to move in. We have a little joke that it's resident to president. But Vivian Hamwee, who's the current Hillel President, I met her on her first day at Brandeis. I was the first person she had met. She was my first resident to move in. But I remember seeing her mezuzah on the door when she moved in. So I lightly knocked on the door as she was unpacking. And I said, "Hi, my name's Riley. I'm your CA." And to see that initial interaction and to see her leading the room now, it's been really rewarding to know that you can make an impact on someone's life just by being there and being a support. So yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so I want to talk really briefly about beyond Brandeis. So I know you mentioned that you want to go into Jewish career, Jewish life, professional Jew, if you will. Can you just describe, maybe for those who don't know, what that looks like, and then also kind of how Hillel set you up for that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different careers that a Jewish professional can look like. Anything from taking care of temple or synagogue, administration, and things like that. Which can also include being in the rabbinate, or just overseeing a religious school program, to kind of those more informal programs that are youth group or camp and there are actual full-time staff who run those. So I'm really considering, I think, more on the experiential education side of like youth group and camp programming. I've actually, I think because of my experience in Hillel, I'm even looking at jobs at Hillel International. We'll see what shakes out. But I think one of the unique things is that I've been prepared because I've actually gained the experience like taking a program idea from scratch, workshopping it, working on the supplies and the program outline, and like materializing it into something real. It's been a like weird and crazy time at Brandeis. I think we've had so many programs happening, but I've gained a lot of experience in that, like, here's a Jewish holiday that's coming up. What do we want to do? What's the educational aspect? And like, what are the many things that come in? I've really found like a passion for event management. And I think it's something that, like, even as I'm looking beyond Brandeis, I'm considering master's programs in that, probably to do after some time working in the field. But yeah, keeping my options open.
Amazing. All right. We usually close our podcast episodes with a little game.
Awesome.
So it's rapid fire questions. So just try to answer this off the top of your head without thinking too hard.
Awesome.
Okay? All right. Favorite professor?
Alana Uretsky.
Nice. Duncan, Starbucks, or Einstein's?
Definitely Duncan.
Nice. All right. Owl or judge?
Ooh, I think judge.
I think you're the first person to say judge.
Really?
Yeah. Favorite class?
Ooh, my favorite class. So it was actually with Alana Uretsky. Global pandemics. It was great.
Very
she
relevant.
Taught it. Yeah, she taught it before the pandemic, but I took it after when I got here.
Cool. Favorite Brandeis tradition?
My favorite Brandeis tradition. Ooh. That's a really good question.
Rapid fire. Rapid fire.
I think weekly Shabbat dinners.
Yeah, me too. One word to describe a Brandeis student?
I've used passionate. I think engaged.
Okay. Favorite spot on campus?
Upper Usedam.
Must-see place in Waltham?
Ooh, Moody Street.
All right. Good general answer right
Yeah.
there. And finally, what's one piece of advice for first years?
One piece of advice for first years is take the leap, try a class that you've never even considered, or a club that like may look confusing on the outside, but could be where you find your next best friend.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for joining me and
Yeah.
for telling everyone a little bit more about your Brandeis experience.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, and thank you for listening.